Hey everyone, it's been a minute. It's 2021 now. It's about time to get the DSM out and make some changes and see where we can go this year. So last year, like everybody knows, was a bit of a shit show with everything. You know what it is, and things were half shut down here. We couldn't do anything, so there wasn't a lot going on. But I did make it out to couple little things at the track, and yeah, car went all right, but could be better, like usual. So I have to admit one thing though, like no matter how much a person tries to lead by example and do things the right way, a DSMer is always a DSMer, and did something a little bit janky on my car to get through. Show you what I did. I'm not proud of it, but it got me through the rest of the year. So this spring we're gonna make it right. So as you see, the car is already well taken apart. And that all started from a power steering leak I had last year. And as I alluded to in the intro, did something I'm not entirely proud of, but I made the car work for the rest of the year. And while it worked, I wasn't very happy with how it worked. And so I'm going to fix that now. So you'll see I've got my steering rack out, and the motor, transmission, everything. Why not? Just makes it easier to work in there. So steering rack was doing all good all year. Well, it's been good to me since I've owned the car. Never had an issue with it until I think it was end of September last year, and I noticed one day, came up to the garage here, and there was a spot of oil under the car. And what I found out was this hard line on the steering rack is cracked right here where it goes into the housing. And being tucked up underneath the car with the sway bar, everything all in the way, it was pretty much next to impossible to get this fitting out and make a new line, bend it, blah blah blah, whatever to make it work without leaking all over the place. It wasn't a huge leak, but enough to leave. If the car sat for an hour, there was a spot about this big on the ground, and I'm not going down the track with oil flying out of the car. I'm not going to be that guy. And also, you can see I've also got a boot here that's ripped. That's another thing I noticed while under there. So what I did to get through the rest of the season is I drained the power steering fluid, and I did that. It would still leak a little bit, so I took a shop rag basically and wrapped it all around this line, zip tied it to it, so if anything did come out, it absorbed into the rag, and that worked. There was no more oil on the ground, everything was good, and it worked. I pulled the belt off the power steering pump. Like I said, I'd already drained it, and it worked. But this is my first experience with a 2G DSM with, we'll call it, manual power steering, and it's not for me. It's really not for me. That sucked, especially with the car having a spool in the center diff, trying to turn with the slicks on. That's no fun. And so this spring I said, okay, I'm going to take care of this. I figured either I'll get another steering rack, a rebuilt one, or maybe I'll try to get the one off the white parts car out there. It's probably going to be shitty too, but I would cross that bridge when I came to it. Anyways, as I was removing it, there was too much corrosion in between this bolt here and the housing, and snapped that ear off. So this one is junk basically. This can't be used anymore. But I figured, okay, well, I'll order one off of Rock Auto or something like that and until I came across a group buy on Facebook. Alright, so this is what I got. This I picked up off of a Facebook group buy. This is from NDD Motorsports. The guy's name is Richard Smith. Seems to be a good guy to deal with. Delivered exactly what I wanted, or what he was advertising. And what we have here is a true manual power steering rack for a 2G DSM. It's supposed to be basically a direct swap in. I don't know, they've modified this from something else and welded it to fit our car, but it's supposed to do the job. And it has a higher ratio on the steering rack, so that without the pump you're not fighting as hard to steer it. I believe he said it's a 20-to-1 ratio, and the stock one is something like 15-to-1. So we'll see how much of a difference it makes. I know from my short experience of driving this car with just the power steering disabled, we'll say, it sucked. I didn't like it at all. I liked my power steering. I'm not a young kid anymore. I'm going to be 38 here in a couple weeks, and got used to my power steering, and I didn't want to lose it. So I think this was the next best thing, and supposed to have everything in this box to make it work. Got the rack here chucked up in the vise. I know, bench is a mess. It's a work in progress. Yeah, everything's work in progress. Whatever. They say a messy bench is a sign of a genius. We'll go with that one. Anyways, so the rack ships without the inner and outer tie rods attached, and I'm assuming that's for shipping, so it all fits in the box here. So I've got 2 inner tie rods, 2 outer tie rods. There's a couple spacers here that go in the clamp that holds it on the passenger side. You got 2 of these boots, and you've got the knuckle universal joint for the steering shaft. And when you order this, you can either pay a core charge on this one because it's modified. This is the universal joint to fit this rack, and this is the DSM spline to attach to the car. And see, they've added this shaft to it and welded it in. So either you have to send in your shaft and knuckle and they'll weld it in, or you pay the core charge and just get it all already done. So he's included some clamps, some nuts. Should be pretty straightforward. I guess the first thing I'll do is I'll get the inner tie rods in, get the boots on, get the clamps on, and we'll get the outers on. Maybe I'll wait to put the outers on after it's already in the car, we'll see. And then I guess the steering rack kind of has to go at the steering shaft kind of has to go at the same time. Anyways, we'll figure this out. Also, these are not DSM parts, so you have to use the ones that come with the rack, and as well as the outer tie rods. So if you've never done an inner tie rod before, get her started. Basically, it's really hard to do this single-handed. We're going to give it a little bit of Loctite on the threads, lock it in the shaft. There's a special tool. Some of these tie rods have a flat spot where you can put a wrench on it. These ones don't, so I've got a tool that you tighten to it, it clamps to it, then you can securely tighten your tie rod to the rack. So I'm going to do that because this is really hard to do with one hand. Right back. There's a nice liberal application of blue Loctite. Try to get this guy started in here. I prefer blue Loctite. The holding strength is pretty much the same as the red Loctite, and if you ever need to get this apart later, the blue is going to be your friend. I've used it on pretty much everything I ever do. The only place I use red Loctite is on the oil pump gears, and that's pretty much it. Everything else, clutch, you name it on the DSM, I use blue Loctite on it. Flywheel bolts, there's one thing that a lot of people don't know, and I was taught this when I was an industrial mechanic, is that blue Loctite actually, well, red Loctite is designed to be released with heat. Blue Loctite is not. So if you use red Loctite on your flywheel, it can actually warm up and kind of loosen off a little bit. It's not likely to happen, but it can happen. So I use blue Loctite, which has a higher heat resistance than red in most cases. And I've never had a single bolt that I've Loctited ever back out. So I'm going to continue with my method. If you want to use red on yours, hey, go for it. But this is how I'm going to do it. It's how it's worked for me for many years. So I'll continue doing it my way. So this is the tool for tightening in the tie rod end. It's basically like a C-clamp with a place to put an extension into it, or ratchet. And you just kind of screw it in. The C-clamp has like teeth ground into it, so when you tighten it down, it bites into the housing and lets you put a good amount of torque on it. Alright, I'll get that tight and then we'll get the boot on. So there we go, that's seated in all the way. You can see where the teeth of the tool kind of cut into there, and it's nice and tight. I just gave it a good hand torque where I feel it's good. I don't have any torque values for this. There's nothing provided with it, so we're just going to go with 2 ugga-duggas, I guess. Alright, now we'll see if we can get this boot on here. In theory, it should slide over. The joints are already greased, so I'm not going to worry about adding anything to that. And let's see if I can do this one-handed. Probably not. Alright, this is going to be a two-hander. Also, before I get this boot on here, I'm going to mention I put the spacing here, it's like 2 3/8 and 2 3/8 on this side, so I knew my steering shaft is basically right in the middle. I don't know if this matters. Just throwing it out there. When I put it in the car, it's going to be perfectly centered. And when I took the steering rack out of the car, I had the wheels perfectly straight. So hopefully, when I put it back in, my wheel is going to be straight-ish. I know the car is going to go for an alignment after, but we'll give it a fighting chance on the start. Okay, and I'm going to show you what I figured out how to get this boot over top of this part of the shaft, which is, you know, obviously bigger than the inside of the boot. I struggled, tried to use a screwdriver, try to stretch it over, whatever. That was not working. So what I did, basically, I'm just gonna like force this thing on backwards, like just roll it over itself. Let the bigger part go on. So now it's kind of, you know, rolled over on itself, no big deal. So now if you slowly roll it back, and so I can even do this one-handed just about. It's always easier when you're not filming yourself. Basically, you can force it on over itself and then roll it back. There we go. It's rolled back. The end of the shaft is about here, so we're gonna. There's some little dimples on the outside of the shaft. I guess that'll be, you want to put your clamp past those so it can't slide off. And there's a little recess on the shaft here where that'll be the end of that. So that looks like it should give us plenty of movement for the steering rack. I'll get these clamps on, and then we'll do the other end. Okay, so I got the boot on here. The clamp that came with the kit is really small. I've got one left here. You can see it's about half the size of the one I put on there. I couldn't get this thing to stay tight. I've even got the proper tool to install them too, or somewhere. Where did I do there? See, I've got the tool for tightening steel bands, and I put it tight enough so that it wouldn't slide anymore, and it just kept loosening up, and then it was able to slide off the shaft again. And on this end, I didn't get a clamp for this end, so luckily I have one of these, you know, cheapo Amazon hose clamp kits with the pliers for pinching them. Put one of those on there, and that'll do. So I had some CV boot clamps, and I used one of those. That's where this tool comes from. This is a CV boot clamp band kit, and I put it. The end of the shaft is just about there. I actually ran the rack back and forth to make sure that that's perfect, and that band is right about where that little groove is on the tie rod. So that end is good. Now I'll do the other side. So I've got this tie rod in, Loctated, tightened, and now to go to put the boot on. You can see this end here, the diameter is a lot larger where the little gearbox is. So I think what I'm going to do, I don't think you're going to stretch this over top of that. So I'm going to take a pair of scissors or a knife and just cut this smaller part off. And we'll get that end up on there and clamp it the same way, and same thing on that end. Bob's your auntie. There we go. Little pair of wire snips there, took that right off, so that's a much closer fit. So now I'm sure I'm not going to be able to get that on one-handed, so I'll do that. Be right back. Not going to lie, that was a struggle. That's it's like trying to put a small in a Magnum XL. Anyways, so that's on there. I fought with that like an idiot for about 10 minutes. It's on there and can breathe again. I'll get the clamp on there before that slides off because I don't want to do that again. And then same thing on this one will be easy. That's the little groove I was talking about. Slide that back, put your clamp on. Done. Done. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe whatever. I guess I kind of mangled that one up a little bit, but it's on. It ain't going anywhere. This one's on. Clamp solid. No dirt, water can get in there. The rack's already pre-greased. Outer tie rods. Put a little bit of anti-seize on them because if you've ever worked on anything that got rusted before and try to get those off, well, you know how that goes. So we'll put some anti-seize on there. Put the outers on both ends, and then we'll see about getting in this in the car. Got a good smear of the nice never get it off your finger stuff on there. And we'll feed these tie rods on a little bit. I have no idea. I suppose I could, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll measure the other rack and get a rough idea of how far the tie rods are center to center. Get her in the ballpark, so at least I can drive it around a little bit and see if it works. Using the thinker sometimes. Sometimes. I'm not a complete fucking idiot all the time, but sometimes. So I've got the start of the tape just about in the center of the tie rod. Coming all the way across, and it looks like we're about 52 3/4 or 134-ish centimeters if you swing that way. And again, this is just roughing it out. There's no way that's going to be aligned, and the car needs an alignment anyways, especially after this. So that'll just get us in the ballpark, so we're not 9 degrees toe out or something like that, and it won't kill the tires in the half mile. Okay, so I got her measured out, 52 3/4 roughly from that greaser to that one. And I've also got 7/8 of an inch between the jam nut and the tie rod on both ends. I wanted to have the tie rods roughly in the same place both ends. So in theory, this should work and be somewhat close. So almost there, almost ready to put her in. And so now the rack is ready to go in, and per usual with any major job on a DSM, it's going to start off by struggling like an idiot under the dash because we need to get the stock steering shaft out of there. I love these cars. Alright, so I'm going to get this shaft out of here. I believe that other part just slides out, I think. I don't really know. I'm going to figure it out as I go. But would you just look at these sassy red pedal arms. Man, I thought these were fast in the day. Back when I thought modding was, you know, about adding color, and I had fancy pedals on here too at one point too, but we won't talk about that. I'm going to struggle to get this out, and I'll explain how I did it afterwards, because it's going to be a struggle. Anyway, so I managed to figure out how to get this to move. Some people are lucky enough that theirs just slides right out, because it's just a spline shaft up inside another spline shaft, which is then attached to the steering column, which you don't actually need to undo anything there, so you don't have to struggle like an idiot under the dash yet anyways. Maybe later, who knows. So what you need to do to get this out, or if yours won't just slide out, see, it's out now, but what I found worked pretty good is I've got a slide hammer here, and I put the little hook attachment on it, and put that guy up in there, caught it on the edge, and just gave it like 3-4 whacks, and out she came. Now, see, there's just a tiny little bit of corrosion on there. Or is, no, that's plastic. But anyways, yeah, there's a little bit of corrosion on there, just from the car being its age that it is. And maybe a little bit of paint, and that just made it be a pain in the butt. So, yeah, that's out. We can get the new one and stab that up in there, and then we'll be ready to put the rack in the car. And if you're wondering why we have to change this piece, it's because this piece is like a hot dog down a hallway, so that doesn't work. Grab the one from NDD. Perfect. Nice and fresh. So we'll stab this one up in the steering column. Like usual, give it a little application of anti-seize. Never hurts anything. Keep it easy to take out for the next guy. Like a glove. That one slid right in nice, no issues at all. So now I'll work on getting the rack in here. Okay, bear with me here. It's not a very easy place to get in here, but I was able to get the original rack out without removing the sway bar. It's a tight fit, but it can be done. And this one is actually a little bit harder to get in than it was to take the old one out, because this little box here where the gearing is a little bit longer, I believe, and the steering shaft is longer. But I was able to kind of get this box over in here, kind of angled down towards the ground at the other end, get the steering shaft pointed up in the hole, and you know, struggled a little bit, and eventually it got in past the sway bar. So you can do this job without removing the sway bar. Saves you all of 4 bolts, no big deal. But okay, so now I gotta get these bolts in here, and then on the other side of the steering rack, if you've never worked on the steering rack before, try this. So this end, it's like a clamp that holds it in, and the kit comes with these nylon spacers to go in that clamp. So I'll get that clamp in there with these spacers and the bolts, and we also got to get the steering shaft hooked on before we get too far here, and we're not able to get it on. Okay, so first thing to do there, once you get it up in place, I found you can kind of get the rack up in place, and the sway bar will kind of hold it in, and it won't fall out without any bolts in it. Get your steering shaft on, put a little bit of grease or whatever on the joint there, and there's a groove where this set screw will go in, and I'm going to Loctite all of this later once I get everything finalized. Alright, we're in. I'll show you this as best as I can. You know, it's kind of hard underneath the car when you don't have a lift. But the bushings are in there, the nylon bushings. You can use the factory bolts for this end. I found the factory bolts at this end were a little bit too long. They have, you know, they're not threaded all the way. And these brackets are thinner than the brackets on the stock rack. So I found a couple other, these are grade 7. I found a couple other grade 7
DSM bolts in my my bucket of DSM bolts, like every DSMer should have, and they're probably about a 1/4 inch shorter, and they went right in, bottomed out, everything's tight. So now I can put the tie rods in at the other end and button up the steering shaft on the top side, and we should be good to go. Okay, so I got this all together. I took the set screw out, and on the shaft there is a little groove, and I lined up the hole here with the groove, and I'm going to put some Loctite on the set screw and drive that in. Okay, so that's all on. Loctited the set screw and put the jam nut on. There's a little bit of Loctite on there too. And before I did that, I made sure the steering wheel was straight and the wheels are straight. And because if it is off a little bit, you can, even with this in the car, I found you can still slide this in enough to slide it off and reposition it a little bit on the splines if need be, and also underneath the steering column you can do the same there. But this is way easier to get at, so get things as close as possible before you go for your alignment, and it's going to be way easier on everybody. Okay, so I got the tie rods all in both sides, but just put the nut on for now. Didn't put the cotter pin in, and the jam nut here is just snug, finger tight, because we got to align this thing, and we'll wait and deal with that another day. Steering wheel feels nice. There's a little clunking there. That's the axles are loose right now, but no, it feels nice. Obviously I can't give you a good review on how easy it steers versus the stock rack that's been depowered. That'll have to wait for another day, but overall install went pretty good. The only little complaint I had about the rack was the clamps that they sent with the rack. They didn't seem to want to bite in and stay tight, so I just used the larger ones that I had for CV boots. And if you don't happen to have those ones on hand, they're pretty cheap at an auto parts store. You can buy a whole kit of them plus the tool on Amazon for like 20 bucks. So not a deal breaker. I'll pass this message on to Richard, and maybe he can come up with something a little bit better, or maybe I was doing it wrong. I don't know. So that's going to be it for today. In the future I'll update on how the rack goes. But pretty direct install, no major hurdles, and that's it. So we're on the road for getting the car back on the road for 2021 and getting down the track and setting some new personal bests. And we'll see you next time.